Hello, welcome back. This week I've got a very sound photographer all the way from California with me who spent a lot of time photographing this very amazing thing, Red Bull Rampage, as well as being a very world famous motocross photographer. Yes, this week, Garth Milan. Garth Milan. What a man. What a man is Garth Milan. A multi-award winning photographer specialising in action sports and motorsports photography. He graduated from Long Beach State University with a degree in photojournalism and, believe it or not, a minor in psychology. He's been a lifelong participant in motocross racing and spent lots of time honing his skills at Dirt Rider magazine before helping to launch TransWorld Motocross magazine as one of the two founding editors. With nearly 20 years of editorial and commercial experience and 3 published books under his belt, no less, Garth has modestly grown into his role as one of action sports' leading photographers, without a doubt. When he's not busy firing off many shots that will make your mouth water and your eyes pop out of their sockets, Garth is based out of Southern California and spends his time mountain biking and cruising his boat on Lake Arrowhead. Please do join me in welcoming Mr. Garth Milan to your screens. There's the man, Garth Milan.
Hey, Charlie. How's it going, everybody? What's up? What's up?
Hello, sir. Hello. It's very good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I should put the cap back on, shouldn't I? Look at that.
Oh, looks much better. Nice look.
Yeah, I'm sure Christian will be very proud of us. There's a reference here for people in the know. Look up Christian Pondella and bears being attacked in his house. He was wearing one of these. Good man. So
in honor of Christian, right?
It is, yeah. I'm gonna
through the bear attack.
I'll keep popping mine on and off as we go throughout. How have you been then, dude? It's been a while since we've been in touch.
Yeah, things have been great, man. Besides this whole COVID thing, everything else is gone well. Definitely been slowed down a bit by it, which is pretty much standard for most photographers. But slowly starting to get back to work again, starting to fire off some shots again, which has been awesome. Not only for just my mental well-being, but also being able to pay some bills and everything else. So that's been nice, but it's been a tough 2020. But just trying to keep my head up and make it through to the other side, I guess, is kind of where I'm at right now. But just trying to stay creative, and that's luckily not been a problem. Once I find out that I do have some shoots, they seem to go well, and don't seem to have a problem with anything as far as like being rusty or anything, because I did take a couple months off there. But it feels good to be back to work here briefly, and I'm looking forward to trying to get things back to going again more normally in 2021. So.
Yeah, I think 2020 is definitely a bit of a pause for everybody, isn't it? And an opportunity to find some creativity, I think, which is kind of the cool thing. It's given people a bit of time to reflect and also just have a bit of a breather, really, like from stopping running around. So I hope you've been out on your bike a few more times than maybe you would normally.
Yeah, so I've been trying to just embrace it. I guess we briefly spoke before about that. Basically, the first couple weeks of the whole COVID thing was really depressing for me. I got not kicked off of, but canceled on a couple of pretty big jobs that were actually like some of the biggest of my career. And in fact, one of them probably was the biggest of my 22-year career. Was one job that I literally went all the way to the jobs, traveled several states to get there, and then the whole job got canceled at the event when we were actually there. So that was a big time letdown, a big time bummer, but it happens. Just something that was a precautionary measure that the client had to take, which I totally understand, but it was obviously a big bummer. And then right in the heels of that, I had a couple other jobs cancel. It was a tough little few weeks there, but then. At the same time, I kind of got past that after a few weeks of it. We were going through some really bad weather during that time too, which kind of added to my depression. But once the weather broke and I mentally kind of set myself a little bit better, I just started realizing that I'm always, for the last 20 years, I've just been on the grind every day, chasing that dream of being a professional photographer and really trying to chase my goals. So I've never really had any downtime whatsoever. So I'm actually trying to embrace this now and try to realize that this is the time for me to go do the things that I'm always complaining about not being able to do, which is ride my bike more and just hang out with my family more and go out on the lake and the boat and everything. So I've been trying to, just try to look at it, the positive of things, of just trying to go enjoy myself and do as many things as I can that I guess kind of take my mind off the reality of things. But at the same time, I think it's a healthy thing for my body as well. It's just, I mean, there's not much I can do about things that are being slowed down right now in the country and the world. So I just have to embrace that and realize that this is my time to shine as a quote unquote athlete, and go do what I can do outside and try to get as fit as I can before I get swamped with work again, hopefully. So that's where I'm at.
No, that's a very, very good way of looking at it. I mean, you're right. I mean, the volume of work that you've sort of kept on punching out over the last 20 years is phenomenal, and you've honed your skills to the point that I don't think you'll really lose them in this short period of time. So now it is definitely your opportunity to go and sort of reset and kind of just take a bit of a breather for yourself. I mean, the images that we're going to discuss show you all over the place at all times of day, shooting stuff that's it's not exactly relaxing, really, is it? So
no, absolutely no. It's a lot of fun, but life as a photographer is definitely fast paced. So there's been a lot of early wake up calls and a lot of late nights and everything else. But I love doing it all. It's what I feel like my calling in life is. But at the same time, it's definitely it is action packed and adventurous and lots of traveling, and so there's not a lot of free time involved, which is good. I like to keep it like that. I prefer staying busy, but at the same time, when these little windows happen, I need to take advantage of them and seize the day and go out and exercise.
yeah, exactly. Well, look, we'll pull back to that a little bit after we've talked around some of the shots, because I'd love to kick off and talk about some of these that obviously you spent all this time creating, and no better really to start with than someone that you spent quite a number of times photographing. We've got a couple of shots of his in the slew that we're going to throw up today, and the first one is of the Robbie Madison project for DC Shoes, where DC Shoes managed to turn his motorbike into a jet ski, effectively. Right?
Yeah, it was quite a process. And
the shot that I used on our sort of marketing is of the wave. But before I put that up, I wanted to put the shot of him actually getting to the wave on, and sure. you just give us a kind of a little bit of a background on the madness of this shoot, because really, you'd kind of almost think this is an impossibility, wouldn't you, at the end of the day?
Yeah. I mean, in hindsight, the fact that they pulled it off, it's almost seemed impossible, and it's still pretty impressive to think that all the hurdles that we as a crew ran into in Tahiti to make this happen. So it's pretty impressive that he actually was able to ride that one. That way,
it was not easy. I mean, to be honest, I'll put the image up of him going on the river, because that's the first one that's kind of ridiculous. Like, you've spent 20 years photographing people on dirt bikes. Now, dirt bikes, by their very name, are on dirt normally. So to see this big chunk of metal sort of hurtling down a river without any camera trickery or modern day sort of, kind of filming tricks, effectively, is pretty stunning. So tell us kind of what were the disasters, shall we say, that you came up against, and how was it actually achieved?
Well, the process was just such a hard process, because the thing was Robbie had this idea in his head that if you basically get going fast enough on anything and there's a surface, you can plane on the water, right? So he basically just kind of used this principle in his head and decided, okay, well, if I can somehow figure out a way to make a flotation device or a kind of like a board under my motorcycle, if I get going fast enough, I can get planing on the water, which is basically just the kind of rudimentary concept of the whole thing. However, there's so many variables, obviously, when you take into consideration, waves on the water or even wind ripple, any kind of, like, if the water's not perfectly glassy, there's just the fact that he's going, the motorcycle weighs like 200 and probably 30 or 40 pounds. He weighs another 200 and something pounds. So you've got basically 500 pounds close to on the water, which wants to go straight down and sink. So how do you get going fast enough? And what's that magic line of the speed versus how, the levels of where you put the boards on the bike and how do you mount them and everything. So everything he just came up with on his own with his team and with his friends and everything else. And it was just a full trial and error. So it went from, they spent, I think, years testing before it even showed up in Tahiti, all these countless times of going out to the lake and trying to do it semi-secretly where people didn't know this was happening so we could bring it to Tahiti to do this wave. So there's all this planning and all this concepting and everything, trial and error, sinking tons of motorcycles in the lake and figuring out the right angles and everything else. And just when you think everything's set, we go to Tahiti and everything's different. So between the lake water being fresh water, that probably had a lot to do with it, and the different buoyancy with versus the salt water. And then just, I don't know, I don't even know all the factors because science isn't my thing, but for whatever reason, we got to Tahiti and the bike was not working like we had hoped. And he wasn't planing on the water as well as we had hoped. And again, the only thing driving him is a regular motorcycle rear tire spinning in the water. So that's another big issue, is how do you get enough, water flowing through that rear tire to spin to keep his 500 pounds propelled and going forward in the water. So that was a huge thing too, because you don't have a propeller or anything like that. So long story short, I can go on for days about this, but long story short, there was so much trial and error, and so much, as you probably have these photos that you're about to show, sinking of the motorcycle. So
let's check it out.
I mean, there were multiple times where Robbie tried to get this thing going, and we would just have an issue where something would happen and he would hit a weird ripple of water, or just some weird thing would happen and the bike would just violently flip. And he kind of didn't know when it was going to happen. So it's really scary for him as well, because he's got to come into that thing as fast as he can go and hope that he stays on top of the water. And if he doesn't, obviously it goes down really fast, because he either stays in planes or it goes straight down. So hence these photos. So these are a perfect example of the trial and error that we had to go through while we were even there. And I think we originally scheduled a little over 2 weeks to shoot this project. Well, when we got there, and we were thinking casual 2 weeks of, we'd shoot for half the day and we'd go surf or go hang out and check out Tahiti. Well, that quickly turned into every day getting up before the sun came up, trying to figure out this bike, shooting behind the scenes, figuring out everything between the barge, because he went from one barge to another barge. So figuring out where to get the barges in Tahiti, paying off people to get the barges. It was just one thing after another. So anyway, so we finally end up getting to the day of the wave, and he was on basically his last motorcycle. So he had sunk so many and he'd gone through so many parts. He only had a couple of bikes, but he had enough parts for, I believe, 7 sinks. And he was just like right at his limit, because his mechanic, Buddy Morgan, who's a good friend of ours, he was basically rebuilding the motorcycles every night, all night until the next morning, because if Robbie sank one the previous day, he would have to take the entire bike apart, rebuild the whole motor because all the salt water would get in there, rebuild the whole motor, rebuild the whole bike, and then basically get it all ready again for Robbie to start the next morning at sunup to try to do this again. So this was just like every day, all day doing this. And then you add in the fact that it's in Tahiti and the elements that were out there, for 14 hours in the sun every day, and just like all the different, between the sun and the animals and just everything else. I mean, over half the staff of the shoot ended up with staph infections because of there's just so much stuff that can get you out there. You get a little cut on your foot and you're out there in the water all day, and the water there has so much bacteria and so much living stuff that next thing you know, you have an infection, and then you have to spend the next 2 weeks out in the water with that same infection. So what do you do? So that just turned into like multiple people on antibiotics and just one thing after another. So I ended up getting my own little problem out of this shoot, which is a life-altering thing for me. I ended up having surgery after this shoot, because I had, again, I don't want to get too far into detail and gross you guys out, but I had basically bacteria crawl into my intestine from the wrong end here, and I wound up with a really nasty infection. I could barely walk. So by the time we did this final shot, the crew had to lift me onto the boat because I was so messed up with this internal infection in my intestine, and I ended up having to, like I said, I ended up at that time I didn't even know what it was, and came home and had to go through surgery and get it fixed, and I still have problems. So yeah, it was a big
Oh my God.
a big crazy part of my life, but it was, at the end of the day, it was an awesome experience because we really captured such great content of Robbie, and it was just such the experience with the crew and everything. It was one of those, like, I would say probably the most memorable shoot of my entire life. So it was pretty cool, pretty awesome, but also pretty scary. And at the end of the day, when we got that final shot, Robbie ended up going down, and we actually lost visual contact of him for like a good 2 minutes. So that was the worst part of the whole thing. We were all sitting in the boat, scratching our heads going, "Where's Robbie?" Freaking out, of course, on the radio, and his wife's on the radio and his family and stuff. And I mean, it was one of the scariest moments of my life because that's my good friend that I've done so many things with, and I can't see him and what happened and everything else. And so those 2 minutes when we couldn't see him and the water was just crazy, and his little helmet was bobbing and we just didn't see him. That was definitely one of probably the scariest actual like couple minutes of my entire career, just thinking that we possibly lost Robbie. So that was when he popped up, that was just like the biggest, like greatest feeling ever. And then we actually lost his motorcycle because the surf was so violent that day and so big. We couldn't find his motorcycle for a few hours actually. So we had a crew there purposely just there to cover his bike in the water when it would go down. But the crew couldn't find the bike because the surf again was just so violent that day and so gnarly. It was just pounding the bike and it just was gone. And we were so busy looking for Robbie, couldn't find the bike. So we ended up going out to have a couple of dark and stormies to celebrate Robbie's momentous wave ride. And then we were driving back towards the compound where we kept everything. And all of a sudden, one of the crew guys looks out as we're driving along the coast and sees something floating. And sure enough, it's Robbie's bike. So I went over there, recovered, got the bike out like probably 3 or 4 hours later, and it was all good. But it was just one of those trips where just so many little things we dodged and ended up pulling it off. But if you watch the video, you just think like, oh man, Robbie just gets on this bike and flies through these waves. But man, there sure is a lot to it. And that was the interesting part, is just seeing all the struggles and trials and tribulations that led him to that point to be able to ride that wave. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And so, that's why it's like a lot of that stuff people don't really realize. These athletes aren't just crazy people. They're basically mad scientists and crazy people that come up with these ideas and also like the way to do it. And so it blows me away. I'm just happy to be part of being able to capture it, and a small part of it, so it was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, not a small part of it, judging by that story. I mean, Christ, that's I knew about the project. I was well aware of it. I've seen the video, and I've seen the shot, which I'm going to put up, but I had no idea the story was that involved and what went into it.
Bit of it too.
I mean, my word! You see this shot, and I've seen the video, and and the shot is astounding. But to know that you were going through what you were going through when you took this, not only to think of what you'd already gone through to get there to it, it's absolutely ridiculous. That's incredible.
Two Tahitian hospitals where none of them spoke English at all. So trying to translate in French what was wrong with me, that was interesting, and didn't really get much relief there because they didn't know what I was trying to tell them. And then I finally got home, and it was a nightmare, but luckily I had some good friends there. My good friend Don really took care of me. He, like one night I was in so much pain. I don't know what time it was, but it was like in the middle of the night, and he came and drove me all the way to the city, and we went straight to like an emergency room basically because I was just in so much pain. So I just remember some of those days of like, it was a struggle to get through it. But again, and they actually offered to send me home, but at the end, the whole crew. So basically, because the project, we were running into so many problems, we hit our window at the end of the shoot, but then we still didn't get everything we wanted. Plus, we saw that there was a big swell coming in. So they kept a skeleton crew back to shoot this final wave. And so they basically cut the crew down to about half. So they offered me if I wanted to head out and just go home. And there was one other photographer there as well and just have him shoot it. But at that point, even though I was miserable and I could barely walk, I was so wrapped up in the project and so excited for Robbie and wanting to be such a part of it that I just decided to stay. And that's what led them into literally lifting me onto the boat because I couldn't physically get on the boat myself because I was in so much pain. So it was a rough day, but yeah, I made it through and got the photos, and it was, so I guess, and at the end of the day, we won. So
That is,
it was good.
I mean, that is commitment, and that is a high five in a massive way.
Thank you.
Yeah, God. I don't think I've heard a story as hardcore as that one ever, actually. So yeah, amazing. I got to put the picture up one more time because it's just so good. Great. I'm kind of a little bit breathless from that myself. So wow. I mean, well done to you for kind of getting through it. You know, that sounds like a serious mission. But that, if nothing else, then is a testament to the last 20 years of your career, right? Because you know that's a very very hardcore story, and you know at the end of all of it, you still got the shot, and that's effectively what your career is all about, right? It's taking that picture.
That's what a lot of what we do is about. Exactly, is basically pushing yourself to that level to get what you want to get out of the picture, out of the shoot. So yeah, I mean, there's just countless stories of times like that's just one of many of times when I've put myself on the line of. I mean, there was one time I always tell this story too. It was one time I got dropped off on Pikes Peak, which is a 14,500 foot mountain in America. I think it's our largest peak in the continental United States. So that's a massive one. And so I was up there. I got dropped off to shoot a rally car racer going up that, and I got dropped off. I think it was about 2:30 in the morning. I was dropped off with all my gear and everything, and just the food, whatever food I could have for the day, and no toilet or anything. And I got picked up, I think, at about 6 p.m. that evening, and I was up there for one guy to go through, and I had to get the shot of him going through. So during that time, I again had no bathroom, no food, and I was up at 14,000 something feet, trying to come up with how many ways I could basically shoot this guy going by because I only had one shot. So I had multiple cameras hanging on me and everything else, and I went through hailstorm, snowstorm, rain, you name it. Like the weather was just all over the place. But again, just you have to put up with all that stuff and just wait until I think it was like 12 or 1 o'clock when the guy finally drove by, got that one shot, and then wait another however many hours to get picked up because the road's a one-way road. So, yeah. So anyway, there's just like countless stories of things like that, like trials and tribulations to get one picture. And so
crazy.
That's one thing I found out is there's a lot of, and I think that actually there's only so many people who are willing to do that. So it's like as talented as I am or not, a lot of it just boils down to hard work as well, and just what you're willing to do to get the shot, really. And so it's like, for me, it's pretty much anything. So I'll basically go all the way till death to get the shot. So and I think that's, a big part of doing what I do is like, you have to kind of feel that way about everything. So whether it's, and again, that's like, kind of an exaggerated thing, but like, no matter what I'm shooting, I'll basically push myself to get the shot in my head that I want, no matter what. So sometimes it's me balancing on some crazy thing or climbing a tree or whatever. And, people are just sometimes just like, what's he doing? Or what, like, is he crazy? Or like, why is he balancing on that bridge up there? Or, whatever. But it's like, that's just in my head. I almost kind of turn off a bunch of other probably safety factors or warnings in my head just because I know what I want, and it's like it's like an itch you can't scratch. You want to scratch it, and it's not like you can't satisfy it until you get that picture. So where do you
think that all started stemming from? Because the next shot I wanted to put up, you mentioned to me is from back in your editorial days, and that's a long time ago to now, right? So what is kind of developed in you to get to that point where you have that mad itch to scratch, that you are just willing to go to that extreme that we've heard in the Robbie story? What was it? Say, did you see anything starting with this shot of Ronnie Renner starting to kind of develop in yourself to be that person that you are now?
Yeah, I think so. I think it should. At the end of the day, I just have I have a super high standard in my head for like what the picture is that I want, and I fairly, I kind of didn't know what I want going into a lot of times. And again, I'm just not like satisfied until I get like what that level is in my mind. So say like a rider is going to do just some crazy feat one time or something, like in my head, I'm like not satisfied until the picture is as good as what the athlete's doing or better. So it's like, there's just like I guess it's like a high standard in my head of like what I want to get out of a shot or out of a shoot in general. And I'm not happy with like something that's just mediocre. So like if in my head, so maybe that's skewed because it's just what my creative mind is seeing. But in my head, I'm not happy until I get a certain level of shot. And that's why I love digital cameras so much, because you can kind of see the progress of it. And I love being able to chimp and look down and see the thing develop and know, okay, well, this is exactly what I wanted, or no, that's not what I wanted. And if it's not what I wanted, it bums me out. And then I'm like, okay, that's not you. You got to go back and do this right, or whatever. And it's like, it's a weird thing because it's not like an ego thing whatsoever. It's just like a internal thing that like it's hard to describe really, because it's just like a standard, I guess, that I've set for myself. But it's not like a standard. It's like, oh, I have to be better than this person or better than my last shot or anything like that. It's not that at all. It's just that I'm not happy until I get what I want out of the picture. So, and I guess that own bar is just set in my own head, but there's just like a level of what I want out of a picture. And again, sometimes maybe that's not what somebody else necessarily thinks is the best picture, but in my head, I have a vision of, I guess, of how that shoot maybe should come out, or what the best way to capture the feat that person's doing. And I'm not happy until I get that. So, and I'll pretty much do anything I can to get that picture to make myself happy, I guess. Is the end of the day.
But maybe it does stem from your time setting up the magazine, because you obviously wanted to get the best shots. Therefore, you get traction with the magazine.
Sure.
Maybe that's kind of a part of it.
I think a lot of that too is like working with art directors that I've worked with, and like being involved on the editorial side is, I do see, because you start to see the magazines or see just materials come together, and you start to realize like what paints a picture of a shoot best, and what holes might be there for the viewer to see. So I think like, telling a story, whether it's editorial or commercially, or, for, nowadays for, blogs or Instagram or whatever, there's ways you can tell a story and things in your head that you like, things you want to imply or show visually about the shoot. So I think that's like a big part of it too. So I think that like my editorial background definitely helped in my storytelling, whether it's commercially or not. And I think that, again, like just with working with the art directors too, with like the layouts and things, and knowing like where people want the subject in different photos. Yeah. There's just a lot of things kind of going on through my head when I'm shooting, but I think a lot of that is just based off of my experience, or definitely, draws from my experience as a magazine journalist. So
sort of creating negative space, making sure there's places for copy.
Yeah. Not just filling the frame and kind of, creatively trying to place your subject and stuff. So I think a lot of it too is like, just, I did spend a lot of time studying in college, studying design and things like that. And so I think that like having concepts of design in my head as a photographer, I think really helped me as well, because I feel like there's a lot of basic design principles that are really important in photography, and they really translate well. So honestly, like I always tell people, like, I took a million different classes in school, and one of the most important ones was actually one before I even went off to my major of photojournalism. It was still when I was just doing my minor at the lower level it was my first year or two of college. I took a basic design principles class. That's what it was called. And it was just, huge in just expanding my mind of like realizing principles that are very visually impactful. And that's a huge thing with, obviously, whether your medium is canvas or your photographer. It's all that stuff is just such an important part of it, and knowing, what looks nice visually on a canvas or a picture or a screen or whatever, whether you're doing video, it's all the same principle in terms of like the how you're laying the thing out, whether you're laying it out, whether you're putting the subject in the upper corner, or you're painting, whatever. It's all kind of it's all tied together, I think, in art. So.
And it shows a lot of your shots. The shot of Ronnie Renner, for example, you've got nice placement, top left, top right. Your eye is drawn really beautifully, but you've got great negative space in the dark mound of where you could put copy if you need to. But I mean, this is a shot from 15 years ago or something.
Probably something like that. Yeah, it's definitely an oldie. Probably 12, 13, yeah, something like that.
And that's that's a quality shot. Obviously, you knew your skills back then. As a photographer, and you've played to the design elements obviously too. Just tell us on that one there. This is a night shot, right? This is you said it was kind of an editorial shot, a personal sort of a project.
It was, yep. Yeah.
This...
So Ronnie and I and my father, Tom, and then Ronnie, and then another friend of ours, Steve Hogglestein, who's actually now gone on. He was a professional rider like Ronnie and really, really good, but he's gone on to become a director now for commercials. So he's doing huge things for Toyota, Honda, a bunch of different companies now. And he's super, super legit. He's actually come up with a designed motorcycle with a massive mount for a gimbal and a red camera and everything. So he's doing like stuff for Hollywood now with this motorcycle camera he's designed, and he's gone on to do a ton of stuff. A really creative, awesome guy. So anyways, all us four went out to the desert for a couple of days one time with just the intent of going out there and capturing awesome stuff and just doing, personal projects, fun camping trips with the boys, and then whatever we got, we would publish in the magazine. So that's kind of like what back in the magazine days, I could take trips like that, and being part of the editorial staff, I could just, basically say, all right, we're going to go out there and just try to get what we can get, and we'll use it for, the photo sections and stuff in the magazine. So we went out there with the intent of, we didn't have necessarily that shot in mind, but we just went out there with capturing cool, creative things. So when we got out there, we happened to, I've kind of always wanted to do a long exposure shot like that, where you can really kind of capture the whole essence of what freeride guys like this do. And that big, their big thing is going out into the desert somewhere beautiful and riding and finding like a really cool jump with, some usually scenic backgrounds, but obviously this is at night. But the whole thing is really just camping with your friends and again, finding awesome things to shoot or do videos with and stuff like that. So it's all just kind of like it all comes together, and it's just a really fun time. So I was trying to capture that in a frame in terms of like the whole camping aspect and the whole kind of like, what it's like to go out there and try to find stuff and out in the desert. So anyways, I just came up with this idea of like trying to show the campfire with the trailer and everything, but also show the jump at night. And again, like obviously it's hard to jump a dirt bike in the middle of the night. So I just thought it was an interesting shot, because you look at it, it's kind of like visually takes you back a little bit, because you're like, wait, how's this guy jumping in the middle of the night?
Precisely.
So anyways, what we ended up doing was I think we ended up being, it's like right in the neighborhood of about a 7 or 8 second exposure in that. And so what I did was I just put the camera on the tripod, got the background fire and campground stuff set up. We had our buddy in the background drinking beer in the background of the campfire. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but so we kind of got it all, the mood set up, and then we used headlights to illuminate the headlights from like a off-road vehicle to illuminate the ramp or the jump just enough of the face so it was safe for him to be able to see. I mean, it was still really sketchy and still really dark, but for him to be able to see the takeoff, and it was the same thing on the landing. But he's basically jumping out into the pitch dark of the night, because I needed everything dark to be able to really pop it. So it was really dark out.
Did he land? Were you using modeling lamps there, or did he land in the pitch dark after the flash had burnt his eyes?
Well, so we were just using like, I'm not sure if it was a modeling lamp or I think it was just like some kind of like a headlight possibly or something on, but he didn't have much light at all to see. It was basically like landing like almost blind, but just enough to like, it'd be like if you were outside of your garage or something at night and you just had like a little bit of light that was falling off from your house or something. Okay. So you have like enough to where, you could see maybe a crack on the sidewalk, but it was almost dark. So it was like, I mean, if you were put it this way, if you were at ISO 6400, you'd be like a tenth of a second out there. So, it was like not even, it was dark. It was really dark. So basically, what we did was, I had my dad, I just put the camera on the tripod, and I just had my dad stand to the side of me with holding the light, and I would just pop it manually at his peak. So we just did this for a little while, did a few jumps, and kept messing with it, and finally got the timing right and the lighting right and everything else. And but yeah, we ended up using, I can't remember how many lights, but several lights, and just the whole thing was pretty cool. It was a cool project for me to just kind of push myself on, because again, I just didn't know. I've never done something like that where I did combined a long exposure with dirt bikes at night like that. So again, it was just like one of those fun things that I basically used some of the principles that I had learned from other shoots or in school or whatever, and kind of put them together to make this image at night. And it was a lot of fun. And again, it's something I haven't really done for a long time, but looking at it makes me kind of want to go back and revisit the idea, because it is a pretty cool shot. And it's even though it's kind of old, it's kind of an oldie but a goodie, because it's kind of timeless, because like he's still what he's doing and the jump he's doing is still relevant today, and it's still a pretty good sized jump and everything. So so it's cool. Another thing I like to do is I love like shots like that are a bit timeless, that can be relevant 10 years later and aren't just cool because it's like the guy in that set of gear or that bike or something, which is a lot of the racing stuff tends to be like that, because people associate riders with certain eras, and they really like a rider from that era because his gear or whatever, which is cool in its own way. But I also like to make stuff that just visually is holds up as well, and you can look at it 10 years later and still go, oh wow, that's a cool way to shoot that picture, or a cool concept or something that still holds up. So
yeah, well, you definitely did that with that one. I mean, now you got a bit of spare time on your hands. Maybe you should go out into your backyard and go and try and do a few more. You can
well, my colleague Chris Tedesco just did a really cool, and actually it was really similar. He went out with a friend of ours named Tom Parsons, and they went out and did a similar shot, but with the Milky Way in the background. So Chris kind of took it up to a level, which is cool. I was stoked on that. I don't even know if he ever even saw this picture or whatever. I'm not trying to say that I inspired him or anything, but I'm just saying that he, I've seen people do similar shots now that were really cool too. So it was, it's cool to see that and to see the evolution of it and stuff like that. So I think maybe
next full moon.
Revisit it.
Next full moon, Garth. That's it. When the next full moon is out, then I want to see some product. I want to see something come out of that.
Some magic. Okay, some magic happened. All right, let's do this.
See, look, it's not always been obviously about, or it's not always about motorbikes. I'm going to jump to the Rampage one before we head over to something slightly different. Now, obviously, we had our caps. I'm going to put it on for this shot. Obviously, clearly there we go.
So, my favorite event of the year right here.
Look at that.
I love it.
There's up on screen now is the shot of Tom van Steenbergen at a Rampage, doing a jump that frankly scares me off this chair. I mountain bike, you mountain bike, but I definitely wouldn't be seen to be doing something like that. Now, you've photographed Rampage countless times. What's it like, and what for that particular shot? I know you scramble around all the dirt hills and you're trying to find all the spots, and in this, the sun's poking behind, and you got sort of effectively lots of people doing death-defying stunts over the top of you. I'm not sure they're any more death-defying than what we just talked about, but what is it like shooting something like that in comparison to shooting sort of what we've talked about so far? More dirt bikes.
Well, yeah, I'd say that's a good question, Charlie, because shooting Rampage is definitely, that's like the pinnacle, I think, of what I do in terms of like effort, but also fun and everything. It's like I said a second ago, it's my favorite event of the year, just in terms of I'm a mountain biker myself, so I love it and I can really respect it. But also there's just so much to that event from so many standpoints. So for the rider, there's so much creativity involved, because those guys go out there and they only have about 2 weeks to basically turn this straight up hill, or cliff, basically, and turn it into like this basically artistic line that flows down, and they have all these jumps mixed in and everything else. None of that stuff is built, which I think a lot of people probably just assume that like Red Bull handles it all, and they go out, these guys go up and just show up and jump, do flips, all these things. Well, that's not the case. These guys go out there and build their own lines with their own crew. They're given a small budget, a small number of max or a small number of a maximum people they're allowed to have on a dig crew, and they go out there with shovels and sweat it out for 2 weeks and make all these courses. And so you're judged not only on how you ride the line, but the line itself, the obstacles that you've made on the line, and there's just so many variables because you have to do the line perfectly, make the line perfectly, and throw a bunch of cool tricks that are better than everyone else's in order to win. So there's just so many things to it, and I just love that the challenge of it, and just the there's so many factors I love about it. So to photograph it, once again, not only is it the coolest, but it's by far the hardest event that I shoot every year. I mean, hands down, like not even close. So like we're just because. Not only are we trying to keep up with the athletes and scrambling around trying to stay with them, but the course itself, I mean, it's pretty much like I think it's like over 1,000 vertical feet, and most of it is nearly straight up. So it's basically like you're rock climbing, but without ropes. Yeah. So there's times when you're literally hanging off sections where you have one footing, and if that foot slips, you're going 200 feet down with all your gear straight down a cliff. So there's times when I'm like straight up scared, like hanging off the side and just waiting, like literally just counting, like please hurry, waiting for the rider to drop because you're so unsure of your footing and stuff. And I've got pictures of that where I'm like, like showing like, look at this, like, wow, like it's nuts. So anyway, so like physically it's crazy exerting. And then when they actually start the contest, the riders, they have this huge range of this whole mountainside they're able to do, and they all have to build their own creative lines. So the lines go all over the place. So one guy might be dropping on the far side of the course that's, a half a mile over to the side there, and then the next guy drops and he's on the other side. So you've got to figure out how, as a photographer, you've got to capture them, every one of them, because you don't know who's going to win. So the pressure is that and so there's the top 3 people, there's the best trick, there's like the crowd favorite. So there's all these moments, and you have this massive course that you're tasked to try to get to that moment when that rider does that special thing, and you try to capture it.
But you're not shooting everything, are you? I mean, every single rider, or are you spreading it out?
Every rider, and it's like luck of the draw basically, because you can't plan it out because we don't know where the craziest action necessarily is going to happen. We don't know, like the rider might do some cool front flip off of one feature that is the thing that wins the run for him, or the coolest moment of the thing. But if you're at the other end of his run, then no one shot it. And then all of a sudden the bosses are like, hey, where's the shot of Brandon Semenek doing whatever? And you're just like, oh, I was at the other end of the course. And they're like, okay, well, that doesn't do us any good. So it's a stressful pressure cooker for sure. And, luckily the guy who hires us, Chris Warren, he's nice enough to have our staff fairly large for that event. A lot of the Red Bull events will only have, 1 or 2 shooters. That one we typically will have 4 or 5 shooters. Well, actually, sometimes even more than that. Yeah, but I'd say our crew's around 4 or 5, and that's a huge thing because it allows us to, at least divide a little bit. But there's really, we've tried it in the past to try to plan it out, and like so and so shoots this section, but it's just too hard to do that, and it just doesn't end up working out really well. Right. So we just usually end up just scattering and just trying our best to capture everything, and knock on wood, we usually do, but it's stressful to get there. So like for this instance in particular, that was a big moment, and a huge one of those top 3 moments we had to capture. And so and again, like not knowing exactly what he's going to do off of there's so many jumps and obstacles throughout the course, we had to, as photographers, we had to kind of like in our heads decide what, I think there's 21 riders. We have to decide what each person's probably best thing is on their run. So for his run, I kind of knew that one feature was a big one. Right. But the problem was it was trying to get there. I knew he was a big player who could possibly win the event, or at least be top 3. But I was shooting something from the last guy's feature or run, and I had to try to make my way over there. So I, on this one, didn't even get exactly to where I was originally anticipating or planning to try to shoot this guy's flip off that massive drop. I just literally physically couldn't get there in time. And then not only that, but I had a course worker yelling at me, telling me that I couldn't go where I wanted to go. And that's, again, these are all normal, typical factors in the everyday shoots. These kind of things, you have to be quick on your toes and just think through these things. So like, you might be set up, ready to go, and they're ready to call the guy to drop off, which is what I was doing. And all of a sudden, this lady comes and tells me I can't be there. So I have to just rethink everything real quick. And so I just scrambled to even get there. And then when she said I couldn't be there, I had to rethink and shuffle over. So all of a sudden I realized the sun wasn't exactly how I wanted it and everything else, but I just had to shoot and capture this moment of what he was doing and hopefully get lucky and nail it. So at the end of the day, it ended up happening. It worked out great. And it was almost like a happy accident that I got that angle. And I really liked the sun coming through and everything. But again, that was like a huge lead up to that, because there's just so many factors. And again, I think a lot of people just kind of assume that, like, I'm set up waiting for this to happen and everything's like, it's not like that. It's all on your feet, and like, you miss stuff really fast. So that's, I think, what boils down to, just being quick with things too. So you have to be creative, but also thinking on the fly and being, just kind of being loose with your program and being able to adapt to things, because it happens fast out there and there's a lot of variables that get thrown in. I've had countless moments. We had one where Travis Pastrana in Long Beach, he jumped, I think it was like over 320 feet or something over the water and landed on a barge on his rally car. So you just to wrap your head around that, I mean, it was just insane. And again, it was a one-shot deal that we spent weeks prepping for, all picking out exactly where each photographer was going to stand, trying to envision what the light would be like. I mean, we were there for days in advance, just scouting our angles for this one time. So did all this work, all this build up, everyone's all assigned to their spots. Right when I get there, this security guard lady comes and kicks me out of my spot that was all pre-approved by Red Bull, but she's just a random yellow jacket security guard who doesn't know. She's just doing her job and was told to kick people out of there. So I get up there and ready to go. I can hear the rally car firing, and all of a sudden she's just like, "Sir, you can't be there. Sir, you have to leave. Sir, you have to." And I'm just like freaking out, because this is just like, I was literally spent the last however many days thinking of this picture in my head. Just like we were saying, like, you have this picture in your head, and this is what I want exactly, the right angle, the right everything, and I can't be there anymore. So she kicks me out, and I literally have to jump over a fence with all my cameras. I just end up thinking quick on my toes again, thinking like, what else could work for this? Like, what other angle could I come up with? Run over to this other spot and end up getting, firing it off and making it happen. But again, it's just an example of, like, it happens quick out there, and variables get thrown at you really fast, and you just have to be quick on your toes. That's just part of our job, and a lot of my best shots come from just moments like that, where that's where you're and just making it happen.
That's where your creativity, your instinct kicks in a massive way, doesn't it? You've got all there's that classic phrase, best laid plans, and it all just goes completely out the window, but you still come away with the goods. Now, that clearly, I've said it, I'll say it again, it's testament to your skill set. But I mean, you talk about how things can change suddenly. I'm gonna hop forward to a non-Rampage shot, and I'm gonna hop forward to the image that you shared of a shoot you did for Skullcandy with a Navy SEAL. Mm-hmm. Because time is drifting away from us, and I really want to talk about this shot. And this has clearly, make sure I get the right one on screen here. This has clearly got this in itself tells a story. But it doesn't kind of necessarily give us an implication about what the hell happened. But this guy looks supremely hardcore in this image.
He is the definition of hardcore.
I don't have pictures of him hanging out the plane and the detail that comes, but give us a couple of minutes here, because this has clearly got to be something where you're stuck up in a plane. You've got to doing this. That's something else.
A lot of factors in this one as well. So yeah, that was a really interesting one. So basically, his name is Andy Stump, and he's a former Navy SEAL, and he's now a professional skydiver, and he does a wingsuit and all that stuff. So his idea was he was actually raising money, I think, for other Navy SEALs, and so his thing was he was basically trying to set the world record of the farthest wingsuit jump. So he had to, in order to do this, he had to come up with a bunch of ideas of, okay, well, how do I how do I make this happen? So what he ended up doing was he got this special airplane that took him up to like a normally skydivers go up to like, in the like high teens thousands, like maybe like under 20,000 feet. I'm thinking, I think it's something about that. He went up to like 35,000 feet.
Yeah,
so like up into like commercial airspace.
Yeah.
And so he had to have a special, like normal skydiving planes won't do that. So he had to have a special plane do that. And the other thing was obviously there's no oxygen up there. So typically skydivers aren't oxygenated, but he had to have, that's why he has that crazy mask on and stuff, because he had to have oxygen in a special oxygen bottle that would be just large enough to give him enough oxygen, but not be cumbersome and take away from his jump and everything else. So it was, again, kind of like Robbie's thing, where tons of trials and tribulations on Andy's team and his end led up to this moment of him trying to set this record. So at the end of the day, he got dropped off from 35,000 feet and soared, I think it was like close to 15 miles on his own power, basically, or the wind power and everything else. But the hard part of it is the way that the further you go, the farthest, the more straight up and perfectly like locked out you are. So that entire ride down from 35,000 feet to the ground, every single muscle in his body was as contracted as possible in order to stay as stiff as a board as he could, to make basically the wingsuit as taut as it could be to fly the furthest. So it's basically, you see this guy who's a Navy SEAL and he's done all these crazy physical exertion kind of things. And I mean, he was like to his breaking point, like just pushing to his absolute furthest to try to squeeze every dollar out of, raising money for this project, which was really cool to see. And yeah, I mean, it was crazy to see this guy almost just broken after every jump, because it was just so painful for him to just like hold it and just, go as far as he could. But it was really cool. And he ended up breaking the record and raising a bunch of money. So it was a really cool project to be involved in. But it was also interesting to photograph, because as you said, to shoot it, this guy's flying through the sky a million miles per hour, and we didn't necessarily have a ton of logistical help with that in terms of capturing it from, we did have a helicopter and we did have some things like that. So we shot it multiple ways, because the one time he set the record, we did shoot that way we had planned, but then all the testing where he went close to as far, we were able to capture a lot of the content during those runs. So it was fun. It was crazy, because I would be hanging out of a helicopter and he would come flying by me, and we would try to get him as absolutely close to me or to the lens as we could. So we would, but obviously we have helicopter blades ahead of us or above us. So he's basically trying to come as close to us as he can get, so we can shoot him, but not get taken out by the helicopter blades and take us down as well as himself. So it was an interesting and really fun challenge. And I shot it multiple ways. I shot some stuff with wider things. I shot some stuff with a 300 millimeter as he went by and straight down, which compressed the ground with his suit, which looked really cool. So we ended up shooting in multiple ways, and it was a really fun project. And we also had another jumper capture some of the shots that we wanted to get just using his actual GoPro, from air to air. But for the actual jump, I shot it all with my DSLR, and it was a really fun project to capture. So that was a cool project as well to be part of.
Definitely an epic one. I mean, it shows the sort of there's something in there, the people that you photograph that are sort of extreme to a T, really. Like Robbie's commitment to trying to make that plan happen. This guy's commitment to trying to make sure he gets that record. The Rampage guys' commitment to making their line. There's obviously a real a trend in what they're like, and obviously that plays off into you, really, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
You feed off each other almost.
I live for these moments, and it's I don't know if it's just the fact that I want to be doing that myself, but I'm too scared, so I'm vicariously living through these people or what. But there is definitely a pattern there, and it doesn't get old for me. I can't get enough of seeing stuff like that happen, and I love seeing people push their limits, whether it's through sports or through shooting or whatever it is. It's really fun to see that that evolution, I guess, as you'd say, is just to see people reaching that level of what they in their minds they know they can do, but it's you know, obviously really scary and hard to get there, but when you finally do, it's such an achievement. So I love seeing that, and I love capturing it and being a part of it, I guess, because you know, maybe it's stuff that I would love to do myself, but I don't quite have the nerve to. But just being a part of it's enough of a taste of it that it's really fun to be around. So I really enjoy it, and I feel like it takes a lot of trust too, because I think that, like, you know, the athlete really needs to trust me to capture these things and capture it well. A lot, I mean, like I could say almost all of my like really you know, best or favorite photos are all things that were one shot deals that like would happen one time, and if I didn't capture it the way I wanted to capture it, it was a moment in time that would be kind of lost and never happen again. So that's a big thing, because, you know, I mean, if you're shooting, you know, commercial stuff like a product line of somebody, you know, fashion or something, you can get repeated times of, can you do that again, or can we do another shot like that? And in my world, you don't get that. In my world, it's a lot of times it's weeks or months or sometimes even years of building up to one moment that happens one time. And it's like, if you mess that up, then there's a lot of disappointed people, including yourself, and yourself the worst, obviously, always. But I mean, so yeah, I just try not to let that happen. And knock on wood, I really don't have, I can't think of any stories where I've really like dropped the ball and had, you know, something fail or didn't capture, kind of like, I mean, obviously sometimes you want to capture it slightly different or something, but I can't think of a lot of times where I've just missed the shot. So I feel pretty good about that. I got to try to keep that. That's also kind of a pressure that builds up in my head too, because it's like, you know, you don't ever want to not get the shot. So it's a little scary as well. But again, I think that adrenaline and that rush keeps me coming back, you know.
Do you think the adrenaline, though, kind of, you have it clearly, and that's what comes from shooting these guys, and you have this symbiotic relationship almost. But do you, when you go into these one-shot moments, when you you know, you literally, it's like do or die kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you enter? Is your heart beating like an absolute madman, or do you enter a kind of a zen space where you're just like, I've done this many times.
I think it almost turns into like it's an adrenaline thing, but I wouldn't say my heart is necessarily racing, but it's like it's definitely yeah, I would say almost like a mix of that. It's like a zen moment, but with like the anxiety, but then at the same time, it almost just turns into like a I don't know, it's hard to describe, like a giddiness, or like a just like a energy level, like it just like your energy level gets this high kind of like pingy kind of thing, and then when it happens, it's just such a like a release that it just feels amazing to like actually, you know, when you look down and the person does the crazy thing and you go, oh, I actually got the shot that I liked, and like, oh, and it's just like this feeling that I just, even thinking about it gives me goosebumps, because it's basically what I live for. So so yeah, I'm always chasing that, you know, and it's like that's what it's all about, is getting that feeling of being super happy with the frame you have, and then, you know, that even translates into showing the rider, and the rider going, oh my god, I can't believe you got the that's the best shot ever. And then that's just, again, like what I live for. So that's like, even if I didn't do it for a living or anything, I think that I would still continue to always just chase that feeling and just that adrenaline rush, you know.
It's quite something, and there's a few interesting words in there, you know, kind of. I think there's clearly a lot of kind of emotions and states that you run through with each of these shots, and obviously that's what keeps you going, you know, despite having had a ridiculous infection when shooting Robbie, or hanging out of a helicopter photographing someone who, you know, is flying at ridiculous speeds. You just have this commitment. You like bang, 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 and that energy surge keeps driving you forward. I wonder. Absolutely. I'd love to know. Well, I mean, I don't want to look forward to the future, but I'm really interested to see what the future will be like in 20 years. Where we'll be. We'll have another conversation like this, maybe in like 5, 10, 15, 20, and see what state your heart is in, and what
yeah. Hopefully this keeps me young, but I don't know. Maybe it's going to turn me old quick. I don't know. Either way, I'm not stopping. So.
I'd go with the first one. I think it keeps you young. It keeps you energized. You know, I mean, you keep pumping out these amazing images.
Well,
It's got to
thank you,
be. It's
sir.
got to be a good thing, really, hasn't it? At the end of the day.
Oh, I live for it. I love it, and I just like it's just what makes me happy, and I just like I can't imagine not creating images. So whether it's whether it's shooting motorcycles or it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think a lot of people think that like I only like enjoy shooting motorcycles, but I mean I can shoot almost anything and get that same feeling really. So
Yeah.
that's what's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, there's obviously some things that wouldn't be as exciting as others, but I mean I could take like for instance, I'm not necessarily into or interested in parkour, but I could go out with a parkour athlete and have just as much of a rush like that and a feeling of adrenaline and all these other things on a daily shoot with a parkour athlete as I could with a motorcycle athlete, because they're risking their life and putting it all on the line just the same, but it's just a different sport. But it's
It is.
very
Yeah.
similar in the terms of like the athlete putting it all out there and putting it up, doing anything they can to get the shot and all that kind of stuff. So it's very similar, whether it's again, I'm just picking parkour as an example, but whether it's parkour or skateboarding or motorcycling or whatever, they're all very similar in the fact that not only are they dangerous, but they're also and there's a high level of skill, but there's also there's just so many factors to combine with it. So like between the backgrounds you're shooting and everything else, like it's all in my head, it's all very similar, whether a person's on a board or a bike
Yeah.
or whatever. You're still looking for that one crazy moment with the perfect background, and it's all basically the same ingredients that make the great picture. So that's what's great too, is I can get that same enjoyment whether it's chasing around motorcycle guys or surfers or whatever. It's all very similar in my mind in terms of like just trying to get that one shot that really captures what the person's doing, the craziness of it all, but also make it beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Garth, we've come our full hour, and we've kind of effectively run out of time because we've got too excited. We've had our hearts pumping too much. But it's been really amazingly interesting to hear kind of how your head thinks and hear what you've got going through your mind when you're doing all these shoots. You said you've got all the great ingredients for a great shot, but you've got all the ingredients there to make a great Garth shot. I'd like to say. I think
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
You've been doing it for a long time, and may you continue to slam these shots away, and may we continue talking about it going on into the years, because it's been a super pleasure, and I don't think an hour has gone by this fast when I've been doing
we
these
definitely went
talks.
by fast for sure. And it's funny, it's like as much as I've seen these photos and talked about it a bunch, it's still like it's when I start thinking about it brings me right back into that moment of living that time and being there in the moment of seeing these photographs come to life and stuff. So it's fun. It's always a pleasure to talk about them and speak on them and go back and kind of relive the moments. So it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, pleasure. I think we might have to consider doing a part 2, because there's so many other pictures that we didn't even touch on.
Anytime.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about a date for part 2.
Let's do it.
For now, say goodbye, and I'll say goodbye, and we'll speak again very soon.
Everyone.
Just hang there until I've said goodbye to the world. All right.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Garth, and thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for watching. That was a pretty amazing talk, really. Garth has got some stories that, wow, too many. Definitely worth listening to again. I'm going to go back and watch it myself and just sort of relive some of the tingles actually that I got from listening to Garth. So do join me again next week. In the meantime, do head over to charliepinphoto.co.uk, where you can go and purchase some great art for your walls, and even a copy of, can't remember which way around it is, that book over there. For now, thanks very much for joining, and see you again soon.